So we're back for the hierarchy video, and as Newcastle fans, we always focus on the manager or the sporting director when it comes to transfer windows, on the players we've brought in and the transfer speculation. But there is a much bigger structure behind this setup, and that's what we're going to look at today. Since 2021, when PIF took over, this structure has changed dramatically, with executives, sporting directors and even recruitment staff coming and going. So in this video, we're going to be stripping back all of this, and we're going to basically see who sits where in the hierarchy, what their job roles are, and whether we believe they're the correct people to be taking this club forward, and ultimately whether Newcastle are heading in the right direction with the right people to take this club forward. If you're new around here, I'm Adam, this is Two for Joy. Get down there, like, hype, subscribe, do all the good things. Most of all, hit me up in the comments. But before we start, I just want to say I am branching out. I'm finally doing it. I'm branching out onto X and Instagram. So if you want to catch more immediate day-to-day runnings of the club, things that come up faster than I can give you on YouTube, make sure you head over to X and Instagram. Look me up, Two for Joy TV. Otherwise, guys, let's get into it. So to start us off, we're going to have a look through the hierarchy from top to bottom, from ownership all the way down to recruitment, to make a decision on who we believe is doing what role and whether they're doing it well. And really, what it comes down to is, who do we believe is driving the transfers and driving the recruitment process within the football club? So we're going to start off by having a look at the ownership structure. And 85% of this ownership structure is PIF, the Saudi Investment Fund. And 15% of this ownership structure is the Reuben family, RB Sports and Media, the minority owner. And then we move to the board of directors with Yasir Al Ramayan, 4 PIF representatives that I'm not going to go through the names because I don't want to get them wrong, Jamie Reuben and Roger Thornton, who is a non-executive director but a representative of the Reuben brothers. And the important thing, while I've listed David Hopkinson in here as the executive leadership, the CEO of this football club, he does the day-to-day operations of the football club. He also sits on this board. So essentially, David Hopkinson runs the football club day to day, takes that information back to the board, and they sit and discuss the progression or the pathway that they believe Newcastle should be going in. The decisions are made on this board with regards to big change at the football club. Now, Yasir Al Ramayan is the chair of this board. He gives the casting vote. But every one of these board members has an input, including David Hopkinson. But as we move down to David Hopkinson, he does the day-to-day running of the football club. And underneath him, we have the executive team of Ross Wilson, Simon Caper and Brad Miller. So we obviously have our sporting director, our CFO and our COO. Now, importantly, we're not going to look at Simon Caper and Brad Miller in this video. We're going to focus on Ross Wilson as a sporting director and the hierarchy underneath him, because that essentially is what takes us forward and shows us the recruitment side of the football club. So as we move on to Ross Wilson, we obviously know he's our sporting director. He leads the football strategy for the performance vision. He oversees the football operations and the recruitment side of the business. And underneath him, we have a senior leadership team that involve Jack Ross, the head of football strategy. Essentially, Jack Ross's role is much like Dan Ashworth was for England. So he leads a long-term planning vision or a football pathway all the way from the youth teams of the under-15s, the under-18s, up to first team football, and tries to create a pathway for young players to be able to identify the philosophy that the first team is playing. So whether that's a high press, this vertical vision of Matthias Geisler, they try to feed that back down through the youth team, so there is a clear pathway and progression for young players to make it into the first team. James Bunce, the performance director, he obviously has the science role where he brings the physical and medical stuff. So he oversees the physios and the doctors and people within the club to help with the injury crisis at Newcastle, and we'll see over time whether that actually gets better or gets fixed. And then we have Sudarshan Gopaladesekan, otherwise known as Suds, our technical director, and he really is more data analytics driven. He looked at the tactical strategy and scouting framework for the football operations. He's kind of a key role if you think of it like Moneyball. He's picking out data-driven analytics to try and take the club forward. And then the two interesting roles that we have is Andy Howe as Senior Football Executive. This is a new role for Andy Howe, which only happened recently in 2026. But he supports Ross Wilson on recruitment and player identification. And he has been known to be involved in the negotiations process, which is an interesting position for him to have. And then we move on to Steve Nickson, 15 years of service, Head of Recruitment. Steve Nickson leads the recruitment department and the end-to-end scouting and recruitment of process for players. Steve Nickson obviously used to be Andy Howe's boss, and we'll basically go through this timeline now. I think this is a really important one to focus on, is the career path of Andy Howe and the way this structure's changed, because obviously behind the scenes Newcastle have changed the structure several times with different sporting directors coming and going, and how we've restructured over time, and Andy Howe's progression. And then we'll have a look at Steve Nickson's progression within the football club and how this kind of aligns to our vision going forward. But Andy Howe's progression at Newcastle as a timeline: he came into the football club in December 2021. He joined from Bournemouth, obviously, where his uncle was manager. He had 10 years in the recruitment department there. I believe he had 2 little stints away, almost like loans, out to Plymouth and Burnley. He then was head of first team technical scouting until February 2024. And this is a really key moment in our timeline, not only our timeline, but his timeline. Because he was promoted to assistant head of first team recruitment as Dan Ashworth left the football club. So as we lost the sporting director, we had a reshuffle, which created an opportunity for Andy Howe to step up within the structure. And he became integrated into the first team recruitment process and continued that essentially for a year. And then another key moment after we'd brought in Paul Mitchell. On Paul Mitchell's departure last summer, and this is a really key moment, as Paul Mitchell left, he was then offered by the board to take greater responsibility working alongside Steve Nickson in identifying players to be brought into the club while we didn't have a sporting director. So essentially, in the summer of 2025, Andy Howe, Eddie Howe and Steve Nickson were responsible for highlighting players and bringing them in. And obviously this came to be our last summer transfer window. Malik Chow, Jacob Ramsey, Nick Voltemada, Johan Wissa. And it's really important that we understand that we had no sporting director at the time. So these members of staff have been asked to step up in a role. And I find this an interesting point because most of the time, businesses that I've worked in, when they lose somebody from the hierarchy going naturally up in the chain, if a manager's lost, then the senior management team will actually come down and assume that position. So somebody will step down into a role to cover until they find somebody to refill that position, because they have more experience, because they're higher in the food chain. I found it really interesting that Newcastle actually promoted from below to fill that role, or to help fill that role, in order to move us forward last summer. And how I feel personally that was probably the worst window of transfer business we'd done under the PIF ownership. And the interesting point is, after that transfer window and after the season we had, in April 2026, Andy Howe was appointed a senior football executive. So he is now a key leader in the football department, and he sits alongside Steve Nickson, as you can see from that last graphic. He's now directly supporting Ross Wilson in a completely new role that's been made for him to be in. And as we move on to Steve Nickson's role, this is where things develop a little bit more. Steve Nickson, obviously a long-standing force behind Newcastle United's recruitment, 15 years of service, 6 managers at one club. And he joined in 2011. He was youth recruitment. He was appointed head of recruitment in 2017. And then he worked through the change from 2017 to 2021 when PIF came in. And under the PIF era, he's seen it all. He's seen sporting directors come and go. He's seen managers come and go. He's seen ownerships come and go. But interestingly, in less than 6 months, and this is just me giving facts, in less than 6 months from Andy Howe being given a senior football executive role, our head scout has decided to further his career by joining Wrexham as a sporting director, and is being reported that he's set to leave on the 2nd of September 2026 when he completes his notice period to become sporting director there. And realistically, 15 years of service, 6 managers for one club, you can only applaud this man for everything he's given to Newcastle United. I mean, working under Alan Pardew, Graham Carver as caretaker manager, Steve McLaren, Rafa Benitez, Steve Bruce, Eddie Howe, working under, 2 previous ownerships, 6 managers. He's done a great job in recruitment with what he's been given and what he's been tasked to do. That's all you can say, is thank you for his loyalty and his service. But the interesting part is basically when we move on, it's looking at whether Newcastle are going to expect somebody to step up and fill that role, whether they're going to expect Andy Howe to shift over and become head of recruitment, or whether the speculation in the media is correct in that Newcastle are looking at bringing in a new head of recruitment in Sebastian Krug. And this is really the point I'm most interested in, is whether Newcastle can deliver on what they say. This hierarchy and structure has changed so much in the 5 years that PIF have been involved. Even Andy Howe's role has changed so much in the 5 years that he's been here. Is Sebastian Krug the dawn of a new era for us? Sebastian Krug is a 43-year-old head of recruitment for Borussia Dortmund. And realistically, we'll go through the players that no one man brings in every player, but these are the players that have been highlighted under his tenure. Jude Bellingham, Erling Haaland, Jadon Sancho, Hakimi, Manuel Akanji, and Giovanni Reina. And they are just to list a few. There's Karim Adeyemi, there's Guirassy. He has brought in a wealth of youth talent and experience to Borussia Dortmund and really changed them to a next level. He's an expert in spotting early potential ahead of the market. And he has a proven track record in unearthing talent that drives value. You know, they brought in players like Jude Bellingham for £25 million and sold him for a colossal amount of money. Erling Haaland the same, Jadon Sancho the same, even Hakimi the same. Realistically, Borussia Dortmund is the model that Newcastle are trying to follow. And if you're trying to follow that model, having someone who has been part of that system will obviously help drive Newcastle forward. But the 43-year-old German head scout looks to be one of the hottest talents on the market when it comes to recruitment. Is this the direction Newcastle should be heading in? Is this the kind of guy that will give Eisler the tools to be able to do this job in the way that we'd like him to heading forward? Most of all, in your opinion, let me know. Do you believe Andy Howe has progressed through this club too quickly? Do you believe Steve Nickson is leaving because the structure in this club is changing and it's not heading with the times that would suit him? Or is he going just because the sporting director's job at a club that is obviously clearly on an upward progression path is a better role for him? And do you believe that Sebastian Krug is the guy we should be bringing in? Or whether we should be continuing this path of upward development and bringing someone from the recruitment team up this path in the same way that Andy Howe has progressed up this path. Most of all, and this is the key point that I'd like us to talk about, with what Matthias Eisler has said in his interviews recently, do you believe that Matthias Eisler has enough influence on the recruitment at this football club? Or do you believe that Steve Nickson, Andy Howe and Ross Wilson are making the decisions and that Matthias Eisler is just here as a coach? Like I say, let me know in the comments, like, hype, subscribe. Realistically, there's so much to go through with this hierarchy and this... There's so much to go through with this hierarchy and this structure of the football club. Are Newcastle heading in the right direction? Are we doing what we should be, or as much as we can, to make sure Newcastle's future is one of a stable and prosperous one, to bring in young talents into this team? And are we highlighting and identifying the right targets to join this football club? That is the key thing I want us to look at and talk about. But like I say, guys, let me know in the comments. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video and I'll catch you in the next one.